Welcome to your quantum journey. We have a fascinating interview for you today. Miss Sally Denton, a licensed clinical social worker, is with us. She has a diverse background ranging from criminology to psychotherapy, multiple certifications in EMDR, EFT, trauma healing modalities, as well as being a trained yoga and meditation instructor through the world-renowned Chopra Center. Welcome, Miss Sally Denton, to your quantum journey.
Thank you, Misty. I'm so glad to be here.
So excited to have you. As we were talking about your background, it opened up so many avenues for our conversation today. So I would love to take a little stroll with you and go back through all of these different doors that you've stepped through in your life. So I know that when you and I visited, you started off in Murray State University, criminology, right?
Yes, that was
So,
many years ago.
so tell us about how you started off there, because I love the transition of how your maybe your guides kind of nudged you gently into, not so gently, into the social work realm. So can you walk us through that?
Sure. I graduated from Murray in the 70s, and as you do after graduating from college with a bachelor's degree, went looking for a job, and what I found was back in Kentucky, near my hometown of Owensboro, but outside of Owensboro in Hartford, Kentucky, in a little um, place, Ohio County. And I was a probation and parole officer with adult felony offenders. And it seemed to me like in those days, there, at least at one point, I had a fellow that was on parole to me, and he kept reoffending and going back to prison and then getting out and coming back. And I saw the way the system seemed to be really broken. And I thought I'd really rather be on the other side of this doing the treatment as opposed to being the parole officer that sends somebody down the river, down the river to
Right,
Indigo.
right.
Yeah. So I went back to school. I switched from probation and parole into mental health field and went to work at the mental health center and went back to school to get a master's in social work and really felt like that was more in tune with where my heart was, which was trying to help people, deal with their issues so that they could become more productive members of society. And so, looking around me, I could see that, the folks just needed some help. They just needed somebody to help them find their focus and get back to their heart, because they had lost themselves in the world. And so I had this wonderful experience of being at the mental health center where there were all of these thinkers that were beginning to open up these doors that we hadn't imagined. It was the probably early 80s by then. And, I was starting to read in the field of mental health, we were exploring all kinds of interesting theories and phenomenon that was, just really progressive in those days. And I got into meditation. I started reading all of the Edgar Cayce books and all of the channeled work that was coming out, the Seth books, and all of those kinds of things. At any rate, I ended up doing a private practice in Owensboro, Kentucky for a lot of years. And that led me to learn about EMDR, which is a eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's a bilateral eye movement technique that therapists use to help people release their trauma. It With this bilateral eye movement, you have them, follow your fingers with their eyes, and it begins to unlock things that seem to be frozen in a person's brain. So the right brain and the left brain begin to talk to each other. And it's an amazing technique that I, used for many years in my therapy practice. I also learned about the emotional freedom technique, which is what we know as tapping. And you hold a thought in your mind, like, even though I have this issue with anxiety, I deeply and completely accept myself. Tapping between the eyes, at the corner, under the eyes, in the nose, in the chin dimple, down at the below the uh, bony structures.
Collarbone area.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and then under the arms. So you do this tapping a few times as you go through this process, and you begin to really release. These are the acupressure points that you're tapping on, and as you're accepting, I deeply and completely accept myself, even though I have this issue with whatever it is. And this is a fabulous technique that's helped people release the difficulties, like the phobias, the fears of flying, the fears of, all kinds of fears that we come up with can be dealt with by this technique of emotional freedom technique.
That's amazing. I want to go unpack a little bit of what you said because there was a whole lot of really key things that you talked about. First and foremost, back in the early 80s when you had your practice, people were not really talking about the Seth material. They certainly weren't really talking about Edgar Casey. For those of you that might not be familiar, definitely go check those resources out. But I think there was a real separation of science and spirituality. And we see that coming together now where science is beginning to explain spirituality. So, knowing what you know now, how do you think you had the foresight to even explore those areas, being more in the scientific realm? You were a psychotherapist. There was a manual, right? There was a way that you did things back then. How did you have the bravery to step outside and to even explore those alternative methods?
I think I was born with it. I really believe that I had this crazy kind of childhood, two brothers that are severely mentally ill even today. And I knew that there had to be more than what I could see, more than even what I could learn in a classroom. And I I remember just as a kid thinking about mind over matter, that if you thought something hard enough, you could make it happen.
Wow.
And I've really found that I was able to do that, to manifest things come into my life. So, when I was at the mental health center, I was really there was a period of time where I was very, very stressed. We were having these investigators come in for Medicaid fraud and all of this thing investigating our mental health center. All of these scandals were coming up. And it was really difficult for those of us that were just trying to help people. I was working
Right.
with severely mentally ill at that time. And I just found that I was, really burnt out with the mental health center. And I went looking for jobs and finally gave up on this search, like going from place to place and trying to find a way out of that situation. And finally, one day, after a really horrible interview, I was sitting in my car, I was banging on the steering wheel, and I said, "Oh God, please just help me get out of this situation. It's up to you. I cannot do this. I can't continue at this mental health center, but if that's where you want me to be, I'm just turning it over to you. I cannot do this." And about a week later, I got a phone call from a gentleman who owns this nursing home group, the
Mhm.
You'll probably recognize the Fern Terrace Lodges and Dave Co-Rest Home. It's a group of 5 homes.
Hmm.
And he asked me if I would go to work for him, and he would give me a car and double my salary. And, and so I did, which was really, just turning it over to God, turning it over to this power greater than me. And I did that work for about 4 years, general manager for these facilities. And that allowed me then to have enough money to be able to go into my private practice, which you can't really step into doing something like that if you're expecting to pay the rent and,
Yes.
pay your bills every month. But that was just it's always been for me this connection to something greater, this knowing that I had abilities that were just under the surface that I just knew there was more, you know?
So, did you
It's
know at the time, because in those areas that you were working, now being an energy worker, you know what I'm going to be talking about, the density of those areas, whether it was people that were in difficult phases of their life where they had been in trouble or incarcerated, or you were working with the mentally ill. Did you know at that time, or did you have the tools to be able to learn how to kind of keep your own energy clean? I think a lot of people don't even realize why they're constantly exhausted. They don't realize they're carrying other people's energy or they're entangling with it. Did you know then how to kind of separate your energy from theirs?
I didn't really know, but I had started reading some books. I read the Emmanuel's book, and that was in the late 80s, I think. And a couple of books from Deepak Chopra, and I started to begin to meditate. Um, really, actually, I started in the early 80s, but I really connected with that a little bit more when I began to feel depleted. But it was, again, it was, a life of living in the world, trying to make a living with a young family, and not really knowing what was going on inside my body, even though I was starting to work with energy and starting to feel people's energy. And I could, when I was in the therapy practice, I would be sitting in a therapy session and I would see an aura around somebody that was sitting in the chair talking to me. As they began to open their heart, I could see their energy field around them. And I guess I just really was this inquisitive person who just always kept asking the questions, kept reading the books, and kept wondering what my gifts really were. How could I improve my connections with my clients? How could I help lead them to more peace in their lives?
Mhm.
And just exploring every technique I could find out there.
Do you find, Miss Sally, that when you take your own gifts and you find a way to use them to be of service to others, that they are expanded?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I occasionally nowadays I'll teach a meditation course, the primordial sound meditation, and I'll have a group of people. And as I can feel their hearts opening, I begin to feel my deeper connection to my higher self, and the words begin to come in a way that I really don't know or understand, and I know that they're coming from a deeper place. They're
Hmm.
coming from that soul area or that higher self area, and they're moving through me in a way that, is beyond um, the ego self. It just is this flow and this connection, and it starts with a heart to heart kind of conversation with someone, you can feel their energy and their heart opening, and then your heart begins to open to that a little more profoundly, for
So
sure.
you mentioned the higher self, and I work with that. That you and I happen to know each other off camera, so you know that I practice hypnotherapy and past life regression. And one of the things that I'm always fascinated about every time that I have a client is bringing in that higher self or the subconscious. Is there a way that you can maybe help to explain what that means to somebody that might just now be learning about this or trying to learn how to begin to connect with their own higher self or their own subconscious voice?
Yeah, there are certain times, I think everybody has done this maybe accidentally.
Yeah.
If you notice a time when you just seem to lose yourself in time, um, for me, it's been like watching a sunset that was amazing, that just pulled my energy into it, or at the birth of my first child, and I would look into their eyes and I would just lose myself in that experience. It's this experience that feels like you've let go of all your humanness and you've just reached to that deeper part of you
Mhm.
that maybe you just only experience it in tiny bits and pieces. But with meditation and, with the work that you've done, you can really begin to enhance that so that you can call on that more often. And it doesn't have to be just this accidental experience that you're, profoundly affected in the moment. Um, there and it's a real energy shift when you're feeling that. Sometimes you might notice it as goosebumps that come over you or this tingling sensation throughout your body, and then you begin to just have this expansion of your heart, this feeling of this love or joy in your heart space. And I mean, there's so many just wonderful things that you can experience as you begin to connect with your higher self. And I think it's really personal for each of us, like the ways that we connect and the feelings that we get through that. But it's definitely something that we all have. It's our divine right and our birthright, and it's who we really are at that deepest place
When
when
you
we
take all
let
the
go.
masks off, right? All of
Yes,
the what people think I should be, what they think I should say, what their expectations are. It's just being in that full authenticity.
yes, exactly. Letting
Yeah.
go of the positions and the possessions and all of the expectations.
The labels. Don't we live in a society of labels? We have a label for everything.
Yes, yes. I
Yeah.
like to I like to tell this story. So my I have one grandson, one grandchild, a grandson, and when he was really young, I took him into a subway to eat one time after we'd been swimming together. And the music came on, and he was about 5 or 6 years old. And as the music came on, he got up in the middle of the floor and he began to dance around and just really move with that music and really experience himself in that moment. And a few years later, we were back in the same place, and I reminded him of what he had done. By then, he was maybe 8 or 9. He'd been in school for a few years, and um, he said, "No, I never would have done such a thing. That's not me. I didn't do that." And to me, that was just like that profound moment of understanding how we close ourselves up, how we
Yes.
really, put on these expectations
Yeah.
and hide our golden inside. We keep our gold tucked away inside, right?
And with it, our joy. I've set out on a little adventure where I try to find something every day that either scares me or excites me, one of the two. And I challenge myself to do something every day. And I travel a lot for work. And so when I travel and work's done for the day, I'll go find a little adventure because that's what I would have done as a child. And
Yeah.
so I think we need to go back to having more fun. What makes us feel alive? What makes us want to do the work that we do or spend time with the people that we consider to be our friends and our loved ones? We're missing that. And so I want to
Yeah.
bring it back.
That's for sure. Having fun is the quickest place to get back to who you really are. If you can laugh and giggle and just really
Yes,
experience that, that's
be
really
silly.
true. Yeah, that's
You should
really,
have seen me in the store when I found this guy right here. I mean, I
oh,
probably looked like a child. I had him in my arms and I'm packing him around the store and I was just so in love with this and I thought, people probably think I'm crazy, but I don't care. I loved it so much and it's allowing ourselves to get back into this state of just joy and allowing that to show to others. Somebody might have said, she looked way too happy to be carrying that statue around the store, but in some way they left thinking, what's she doing? Like
yeah,
and I think that just becomes contagious. And so we've chased rabbits, which we'll probably do a couple of times today because your background is so fascinating to me. Let's get back to you had your private practice, and then somewhere along the way, you began really tapping into this trauma technique that you had learned, techniques plural. And then at some point, you began working at Fort Campbell.
yes. So this was really interesting how I got to Fort Campbell. I was working in the private practice and I had been there 7 or 8, 9 years. And my husband was off. He wasn't working anymore because he had developed a disability, an issue where he couldn't go to work. And I was starting to feel the need to leave and move in a different direction. And so I said to him one day, maybe we should start to look at the lake, at Lake Barkley, and see if there's any place that we might want to live there. Or maybe we'll build or do something like that. And he's like, oh, that sounds interesting. So I was at lunch one day and I opened Thrifty Nickel and I was looking through these ads. And there's almost never like lake properties or even houses in a Thrifty Nickel, but there it was. There's this little ad for a house on the lake. And I took the ad home and I said, David, let's go look at this place. Just see what it's like to see, what houses are going for there and see, what kind of situation this is. It just out of the blue with no plan to really do anything serious. I had told folks at work maybe within 5 years I might be leaving, but wouldn't be right away. So on a Sunday afternoon, we drove down to this place on Lake Barkley and we walked in the front door and it's a rundown little cabin style place. And we walked through and down into the basement and out the backyard. And as we're standing on the dock, it's a waterfront place. I looked at him and I said, we're going to buy this place, aren't we? And he said, yeah, let's do it. First, we really hadn't even been seriously talking about moving at that point. But the really weird thing about this is that for about 3.5 to 4 years before that, in my meditation time, I had been visualizing a place with water all the way around it and trees.
Nice.
And in my mind, I was visualizing just a small place, not fancy, but just a lot of water. And once I got into this place and I looked out the windows and I saw how the water wrapped around the front of, it's like the backside of the property. It was in a bay and it wrapped all the way around. I thought, this is the place that I manifested. So
Nice.
it was pretty amazing. So then I had to go find work because, we moved
Yeah.
there without even having any plan. Um, and I had no job. And my husband had no job because he was disabled. So I had to find work. So I went to a couple of places, but ended up connecting with somebody I had gone to graduate school with. He recommended that I try at Fort Campbell, and then I got a job at Fort Campbell working with soldiers who were just getting back from their first deployment to Afghanistan and Iraq. It was right at the beginning of that war. in 2003 when I moved down there. It was the first group that was coming back after their first deployment. And I was seeing one soldier after another that was coming in for um, emergency care. You would think of it as kind of a trauma situation
Okay.
or a emergency room kind of situation for
Hmm.
mental health issues. And so I was screening these people and just really, really overwhelmed with all of the stories. It felt like each one of their stories was like soaking into me and into my heart. And I would go home, and on weekends at the lake, I would just sit and look out the windows and watch the birds and pray for them, pray for the soldiers, and ask the birds to carry me away and, help me with these emotions. And I remember
I have
watching,
a question for you.
yeah,
I don't believe there's any accidents. I think we've talked about this. Do you feel like you were divinely led to be in that place because nature itself serves as a clearing? So even though maybe you didn't know at that time that you would need it to carry out this mission of being in service to these soldiers, that served as almost medicine for you in some way? Do you feel that?
absolutely. I knew that the birds and nature there were healing me. And it was pretty amazing because there was a couple of eagles that would come in the bay. And, if you know anything about Fort Campbell, it's the 101st Screaming Eagles.
Yeah,
That's who
yeah.
they are. And these eagles represented to me um, the soldiers, and yet there was this lifting above that. And I had a vision once of being an eagle in a tree and then soaring down into the lake and becoming one with the fish and coming back up from the water, becoming a bird again, and then landing in a tree and becoming the tree and grounding down from that. Uh, just amazing, amazing connection with nature. And I really think that nature was the only thing that helped keep me sane during that period until I found meditation at the Chopra Center.
And people don't know. I think largely in the Western world, we haven't been taught about how medicinal nature really is. Now, you're trained at the Chopra Center, and they obviously tap into a lot of Eastern techniques that have been a part of their ancestral history for millennia. But here in the Western world, it seems like we're just now kind of tapping into it. You see, viral videos on TikTok and social media where people are beginning to say, put your feet on the ground. It will recharge you. It will clear your energy. So what's your experience in that aspect, especially coming from the Chopra Center? What's your experience with clearing
Well,
with nature?
yeah, I remember when I went to the Chopra Center, I was just overwhelmed with all of the trauma that I had been hearing about. And I was experiencing secondary trauma, which was shutting down my ability to help people. So I found a week retreat there and learned to meditate on a daily basis. And then I began to take their training in order to be able to teach this style of meditation to other people. And I was sitting on my couch looking out my window to nature, to the trees, the birds, the lake down the hillside. And it was in the fall of the year, and I noticed the leaves beginning to drop off the trees. And in my mind, that was the perfect metaphor for teaching people about meditation, because as we sit and still ourselves, it's like each thought drops away
Oh,
until
wow.
there's that clearing. And it became this just amazing connection of me to the trees, to the falling leaves, and to the nature that had provided me with this wonderful peace of mind.
So, for
So,
people that don't know, let's say they're in a high stress role. You mentioned a couple already just in your background. but they're in these high stress situations and they're feeling exhausted or their health is starting to fail. Can you tell people how maybe you identified that you were actually going into a secondary trauma? What warning signs did you have that let you know you needed to do something?
Oh, okay, that's an easy one. Thank you. That's a very good question, by the way, because so many people that help other people and well, all kinds of caregivers, mothers who have children or who have older parents that they're working with. Oh my goodness. Yeah. The symptoms are pretty much feeling tired all the time. And you think of it as kind of a burnout, extreme burnout. You don't want to get up in the morning. You drag yourself through the day. Um, your body may be aching all over, and it might just feel like you can't keep going. Sleep is often disturbed so that even when you're really, really tired, you can't seem to get good sleep or good rest. Or when you wake up in the morning after having a whole night's sleep, you still are feeling completely exhausted. So it's like your body is completely worn out and it isn't able to rejuvenate itself. You're not able to restore yourself even with a good night's sleep.
So while most people wouldn't think I probably need to meditate, what was it for you that you were able to make that connection to say, this is the path that I need to choose? And I'll make this a two-parter. Once you began to explore meditation in a more precise sort of a way, how did that help you? Because some people don't understand the connection. My body is physically exhausted. If I don't get more sleep, nothing else is going to help me. Can you help them to begin to connect the dots on how meditation actually does that?
Sure. So studying with Deepak was really helpful, and some of the things he said were are I hold in my heart every day. And one of the things is that when you're meditating, it's a quiet, still rejuvenation. Okay,
Okay.
so a sleep state is a dull state, but you're rejuvenating your body. With meditation, it's a similar kind of rejuvenation, but it happens with you quieting your mind. So instead of sleeping to rejuvenate, you're rejuvenating your body with this peaceful relaxation. So, what actually happens is there's this release in your body of all the stress hormones when
Okay.
you begin to relax. So, taking some deep breaths and going into this quiet, this stillness, releasing from your thoughts allows every cell of your body just to let go and release. So we talk about the stress response being, you know, your pulse races, you might get sweaty, your body tenses up and your digestion shuts down. That's the stress response. With the relaxation response, which is triggered with meditation and relaxation exercises, all of those things come undone. The relaxation response and it disconnects you from all of that stress reaction. So your digestion begins to come back to normal, your blood pressure and pulse come back to normal, your the tension in your body releases. All of these physiological things are going on in our bodies every time we have a difficult situation in our life. So even though it might not seem extremely stressful, maybe it's just you had to slam on your brakes because somebody stopped fast in front of you,
Okay.
or maybe it's you got an email about a bill that didn't get paid this month. All of those little stresses build up, and we're holding those in our body at all times. And with meditation, we're releasing all of that, not only mentally and emotionally, but physically, because so much of our stress we're holding in every cell of our body. And meditation allows us to totally release that.
Well, and I know that you're a fellow practitioner of integrated energy therapy. And in that
Yes.
modality, we learn that the body has cellular memory and it holds specific types of emotion in various parts of the body. So oftentimes when you see some type of dis-ease, coming in, it might be affiliated with where you're holding guilt, or as you mentioned a moment ago, which we're going to get back into in a second, a trauma response where they were fearful, and where do you hold fear? And so a lot of times with integrated energy therapy, you can identify where that blockage is, or that cellular memories holding those emotions, and you can begin to clear it out. Do you feel like a daily meditation practice begins to kind of gently sweep those away, so that by the time you're working in more isolated areas, you've already done some of the work?
Yes, I really do. It's almost like a vaccine to stress, right?
Okay.
So if you think of going for a vaccine to help you prevent COVID or prevent, any other disease,
Mhm.
meditation is like your vaccine against stress. Um, Obviously, stress is around us at all times, but when we meditate consistently, and I meditate twice a day for half an hour each time, every day, and that is like this um, protection that I'm building up around me to help me be immune to the stress that's going to be bombarding me throughout the day. So even though, stressful things are going to happen, and they
Mhm.
do in my life, I've had lots of things happen in the last 4 or 5 years. And yet I know that even the lows are leveled out somewhat
Mhm.
because I have used my meditation regularly and become a regular meditator. So
That's
I highly
amazing.
recommend that. It's like your own vaccine against stress.
But you mentioned 30 minutes a day, twice a day. So for somebody that might find that to be overwhelming starting out, we're going to close our session today with what, like a 5-minute meditation to show people how they can get started?
Sure, that sounds great.
Wonderful. I'm super excited about that. Now I want to dive back into that conversation where you were working with the soldiers and you had all of these traumas being brought to you to help them heal, which kind of threw you into a trauma of your own. So you sought out this meditation course at the Chopra Center. And so take us from there.
Okay, yes. So I went to California to the Chopra Center in Carlsbad, um, and I studied with Deepak for a week, and we did an immense amount of meditation and yoga daily. And as I came back from that, I just knew that I wanted that to become a part of my life. So it's primordial sound meditation, and I took the training to be able to teach other people how to use primordial sound meditation. It's a mantra style meditation that's very similar to a transcendental meditation, a little bit more refined. Deepak had worked with the Maharishi who brought transcendental meditation to America, and then he split from that and did his own thing as he moved out to California. So I found primordial sound meditation to be just a wonderfully healing tool and began to use that in my life. And also um, the breathing and the meditation techniques with some of the soldiers who would come in and talk to me about their issues. So, yeah, that was just a really wonderful experience to be able to bring more healing into my life and be able to pass that along to other people. It felt like this amazing tool to have to continue the work that I've been doing.
It's amazing when you start diving into breath work. It is amazing all of the different things. I always go directly to Wim Hof when I think of breathing techniques. He's perfected it to such a degree that he can be sitting on, an ice cap in Antarctica in his shorts and nothing else on. And he's worked with the breath so much that he's trained his mind to literally shut off and not think that he's cold. So, on a much smaller scale, how can people use breathing? Because I think again in the Western world we're familiar with Lamaze. It's the coaching of breath work through labor, but we really don't use it for a lot of other things. How have you found breath work to be helpful?
Well, it's an amazing gift to have our breath. And I don't think people really realize that it's free and it's just this amazing tool that, you might spend thousands of dollars to get some tool that would help you feel better, to treat your anxiety or whatnot, but you have this innate tool just with your breath. So, I had a soldier come into my office one day and he couldn't sit still. He was so um, anxious that he absolutely could not sit in a chair. So I said, okay, we're gonna walk and we're gonna breathe. And we walked out of my office and walked around the building. And as we did that, I I instructed him to start taking some deeper breaths, inhaling as he walked and exhaling. Inhale 1, 2, 3 steps, exhale 1, 2, 3 steps, and then making those inhales a little deeper and the exhales a little longer. And we continued to walk around the building 2 or 3 or 4 times, however many that was. I don't remember exactly, but as we did that over a period of time, he began to calm with the breath. And he really couldn't believe it himself what a miracle it was. Just by walking and breathing, he was able to bring his anxiety down to a place where he could, sit and relax a little bit and then begin to talk about what had been going on. Um, I don't know if you've heard of Bessel van der Kolk, but he's the researcher that has researched stress, and he's written a book called The Body Keeps the Score. And in that book, he talks about someone that came into his office in a similar situation, and she couldn't speak. She was so anxious, she couldn't even speak the words. And he had her just begin to breathe, inhale and exhale, take a deeper inhale and a longer exhale. And with each breath, then, he said he spent the whole first session with her just breathing. And then by the next session, she was able to begin to speak. And
Wow.
and that's what happens as the breath releases us from these physical constrictions. Our body is so uh, reactive to these very, very intense stress situations that it's just knotted up, and we're unable to speak and we're unable to relax, and all of those experiences that happen with a profound trauma. And the breath it opens the door to begin to release, right?
Okay.
So the breath is like the number one key ingredient to begin to release the difficulties, begin to release of what your body is telling you, right? So as long as your body is still tense with what's going on, and oftentimes we don't even notice it until like we start to have stomach issues, or we start to have like this tension in our back or shoulders. And if you can really tune into what your body's telling you and begin to breathe, release some of that, and then add some meditation. I like to do a few minutes of breath work, and I like to teach 5-5-5 method, which is 5 minutes of moving, 5 minutes of breath, and 5 minutes of quiet meditation time. And that's a really easy, quick way to get started with this practice.
Did you do that every morning? You start your morning with the 5 5 5, and can it be any kind of a movement?
Absolutely. Stretching is great, just moving. I like to do side bends and twisting, but whatever movement you can do in your body is wonderful. I usually start with 5 minutes of meditation and end with a 30 minute. I like to, I enjoy meditation so much that it's like, yeah, it almost never stops with 5 minutes. But that's a great way for people that have a busy life to
Mhm.
begin to think about a morning practice is the 5 5 5.
So, for someone that is getting to a point where they want to start exploring meditation, do you have any tips on how to quiet the mind? Because a lot of my clients that come through for hypnosis, the first concern is that they won't even be able to quiet their mind. So, with the busy lifestyles everyone has, there's always, something that's calling your attention. What do you recommend people can do to really slow down and just, even for 5 minutes, quiet their mind?
Well, that's always the problem that comes up with people when I'm teaching meditation. How do I quiet the monkey mind? And one of the best ways to think about doing this is to meditate first thing in the morning as soon as you wake up. Um, and again, starting with a little bit of breath work or movement and then moving into the meditation. Also, the other thing about meditation that people don't understand is thoughts are going to be a part of the meditation experience, but they're going to slow down as you begin to breathe and move into your quiet experience of meditation. And with a mantra, I like to teach mantra style meditation. So I teach people often when they're beginning just to use so hum as a mantra. So you just think that silently, so hum, so hum. And it begins to take the place of your thoughts.
Okay.
So as you enter into the meditation with your breath and then repeating so hum, you'll be, repeating the mantra for a while and then you'll get distracted and thoughts will come back in. And as soon as you notice those thoughts, you just gently bring yourself back to the repetition of the mantra. So hum, so hum, so hum. And so that becomes an easy back and forth process. Thoughts come. As soon as you notice the thought, you bring yourself back to the mantra. So hum. I think of it like the waves in the ocean. The thoughts come in and then you let them go and go back to your mantra. And it's that easy back and forth process. But if you think you're going to sit down and have a meditation without any thoughts, then you're setting yourself up for failure. Thoughts are a part of the meditation experience. Even
That's
Deepak has
helpful.
thoughts.
That's helpful information. I think some people, if they feel like they can't do it or they feel like they're a failure right out of the gate, they just give up. I personally started with guided meditations. It's very helpful for me. Plus, I love the idea of just being able to go journey into some fantasy, forest or beach area. That's just the most beautiful description of land and water I've ever heard. That to me was very peaceful. So that's how I started. So lots of different resources. And as I mentioned, I know you're going to take us through one of those. You learned how to do these things, you perfected it. And at this point, Sally, when you were working with the military soldiers, did you start to then understand how their stories? I think the quote, I don't want to get this wrong. You felt like you had 1,000 stories that you were holding in your body, which I thought was
Yes.
profound. When did you start learning to kind of separate that out? What was that process for you?
So I worked at Fort Campbell for 12 years. And when it was
Wow.
time for me to retire, when I was 62, I decided I would retire. And as I was sitting with my meditations in the morning, I could just feel the heaviness and the weight. And it was like I had those 1,000 stories in every cell of my body. And I knew that I needed to do something to release that. So I worked with a shaman who put me into a deep trance state and helped me to begin to release those stories. I was having visions during the practice while he was also having a vision. And he said he saw me sitting around a fire with 1,000 people around me. And each one of them, as they came up, I handed them a present, a little gift, a tiny little gift I gave to each of them. And as soon as he told me the vision he had had, I knew that I had given each of the soldiers their story back. And then they were released into the fire and sent up into the heavens.
That is
So it was a
incredible.
really powerful experience. And I felt like I had really begun the release. But I also knew that, as we hold things, I'm 72 now, I have um, a lifetime of stress, a lifetime of wonderful experiences, but also a lifetime of things that have beaten and battered me to a certain extent. And we all do. All
Sure.
of us have these experiences. So we have to remember that our daily practices are really, really important in life. And also to notice when things get a little heavier than what we can manage, that there are people like you and me and others who are here to help. Sometimes we just need a little more help to get through the really tough spots. It's like we peel off these layers like peeling an onion, maybe an artichoke where you have the heart at the center, whatever. But I think of, peeling off the layers of these experiences, and then you get down to the depth of it. And there's that heart there. Um, so I feel like I've peeled off a lot of the layers that I've been carrying. And when you do that, there's that wonderful, higher self that resides underneath of all of that.
So sometimes you hear people talk about how they might take something that is weighing them down, a burden, a guilt, a fear, whatever it may be, and they'll write it down and they'll crumble up the paper and they'll throw it into the fire. Is that kind of similar to the work that a shaman might do? And I'm trying to give people resources if they don't know of a shaman, which we're actually going to have one on the show here in the next couple of days. But if they don't know where they might connect with a shaman, are there little things that they can begin doing to energetically get those things out of their body's cellular memory to clear it?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's one technique. That's not a, always just, that's not exactly what a shaman will do,
Mhm.
but that's a technique I've used in therapy with people is that kind of releasing, writing the story and then, burning that or, you know, writing a letter to someone that has, been difficult in your life and
Sure.
then sending that off into the heavens. But just to prepare for a shaman, I think one of the best preparations is finding quiet space because a shaman's going to lead you into this journey similar to hypnosis, where you go into a deep state of relaxation. So, really, our meditation practice or sitting quietly or using the guided meditations, all of those things would be very similar to the kind of work that you might do with the shaman, although they have those skills and techniques to take you way beyond what I'm talking about here. Amazing, amazing things that a shaman can do with you. But, preparing for that would be releasing, beginning to, for some folks, writing what's going on in your mind, if you can't just sit and allow those things to bubble up, sometimes getting that down on paper with a journal, I think that's a really good way to prepare if you're going to have treatment with any of these kind of modalities, it's really nice to have journaled a little bit so that it's helped you to kind of organize those thoughts and those feelings about what's been going on with you. And then the meditation also. And I like the yoga along with meditation because it helps to move that energy out of my body and help me release anything that's gotten stuck in there.
Absolutely. I love that you addressed why yoga is helpful, because a lot of people also have a disconnect. They don't understand yoga. Maybe they didn't grow up with it. So I love that you explained that the movement of the body allows that energy to release. What do you think the number one obstacle, and I know this is probably a large generic question, but number one obstacle people have with really beginning to explore these other modalities or to open themselves to the possibilities of these alternative modalities? What would you say is the number one challenge?
Well, think, we often think that we're stuck here, that what we've got is what we're going to have to always deal with. And to think that we can do better is sometimes a stretch. So beginning to um, believe in ourselves, beginning to accept that we can feel better, that we can do better. And as we know more, we can, you know, experience and have a better life. Um, so it's kind of breaking through those obstacles of what has been is always going to be and beginning to challenge ourselves with that kind of thinking. You know, we don't have to stay stuck in the place where we are. We can move beyond that. Um, so, starting to open that door into believing in ourselves and then, opening our hearts and opening to whatever healing and whatever techniques might be good for us.
I
I'm
love
not
that. I
sure.
love that you talked about beliefs. It is amazing to me how powerful beliefs are. Oftentimes, when I'm peeling back the layers with a client, and we're working on a money problem or a health problem, at the end of the day it'll come down to they have a core belief about something, and those can be very difficult to change, as you know. But I find that just little increments like what you said, daily meditation, daily intentions, beginning to find gratitude in things, all these little things add up to big things that then begin to impact our belief system, and then the belief and the thoughts, that's what impacts our ability to manifest. Have you found that those are some things that you've done to help yourself be more successful in intentionally manifesting in your life?
Absolutely. You know, I have told clients too that sometimes just doing one thing different, what just starting with one thing, because oftentimes people are like, well, what am I going to be like if I don't have this in my life? I've always had this issue or I've always had this. And well, would you like to trade that? Would you like to feel better? Just starting with one thing, making one choice to do one thing differently. So, yeah, starting to open your beliefs that, I think affirmations are a really good way to start, even when you're not believing the affirmations to begin with. I am whole. I am healing. I am, releasing from these energies and emotions. These things that even, on your darkest days when you really don't believe what you're saying, to continue to say that, continue to walk that path and take those steps toward healing. It's really powerful
It is
when
so
you,
powerful.
yeah. And when you
And
begin to believe it, then you will really see it in your life.
absolutely. I love to challenge people and say, take me back to a time in your life where you were absolutely driven and determined that you were going to do something, and no one else could convince you otherwise. You were going to do this thing. And once you had really set your mind on it and you believed that you could do it, and all of the thoughts and beliefs kind of matched that vision. Tell me one time when you didn't succeed. And I haven't found anyone yet that can tell me that that has happened to them, because we prove it to ourselves over and over, but then we fall into doubt because when we don't succeed at something, we're not willing to look at what was underlying. We probably had a belief or a doubt that we were going to succeed. And that's really where the resistance came in for actually making that come to life. But I definitely want to make time. I want to have the space available for you to take us into a meditation, Miss Sally. I am so grateful that you are taking this time with us. And if you don't mind, just go ahead and close us out with a 5 minute meditation.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And um, if anybody wants to just drop off into this meditation and keep it longer, then you're welcome and invited to do that. So find a comfortable seat. It's important in meditation that you relax and get very comfortable. If you're seated in a chair, allow your feet to connect to the floor beneath you. If you want to sit cross-legged, just know that you're free to do that. And lengthening the spine is a good thing, but it's also okay to have pillows propped behind you and have yourself comfortably supported. So, number one thing, get comfortable. Allow your eyes to close and begin to take some deeper breaths. As you inhale, allow the breath to fill your lungs. Your chest rises, and as you exhale through the nostrils, release and let go. Shoulders relax down. Body sinks in and gets more comfortable. With a deeper breath now, inhaling deeply. Hold that just briefly, and a long, slow exhale. Another deep, deep inhale. And a long, slow release. One more deep, deep breath. And let it go. And then come back to your regular rhythm of breath. Natural inhale through the nostrils and exhale. Begin to notice that the thoughts are dropping away. And even if there are thoughts that are spinning, allow yourself to just disconnect. Imagine a big pair of scissors and you disconnect from the thoughts. Clip that cord that tethers you to your thoughts. Continuing to breathe easy, inhaling and exhaling. And we'll start with a repetition of a mantra now. So hum, silently repeating this to yourself. No need to force or concentrate. It's just an easy, effortless repetition. So hum, so hum, so hum, so hum. Continue to repeat that silently to yourself. When your thoughts come in, just gently let them go and come back to the mantra. If you hear sounds, noises in the background, disconnect you from your meditation, just allow that like any other thought and come back to the repetition of the mantra. I'll keep track of time and call you back in a couple of minutes. Coming back to the mantra, so hum, so hum, so hum. Letting go of thoughts easily and effortlessly. Repeating the mantra, so hum, so hum. And now continuing with your eyes closed, just release the mantra, sit quietly. Allowing the breath to be easy, sitting in stillness and awareness. Now is a good time to allow anything that bubbles up that you might consider to be an intention for your day. If there's an intention that you would like for the rest of your day or into this week, just allowing that to bubble up now. Planting that as a seed in a fertile field, in this fertile field of relaxation. And I'll repeat a mantra for our group. I'll repeat an intention that we can share and enjoy together. Joyful, energetic bodies. Joyful, energetic body. Loving, compassionate hearts. Loving, compassionate hearts. Calm, reflective minds. Calm, reflective minds. Lightness of being. Lightness of being. And let's bring our hands together at our heart in our prayer pose, bowing our heads in. Always remember when you're coming back from a meditation or relaxation, allowing yourself a couple of minutes to just integrate the experience rather than rushing off, losing the benefits of this experience. May the long-time sun shine upon you, all love surround you, and the pure light within you guide your way home. Thank you. And namaste. I bow to you in peace.
That was so beautiful. Sally, I love that you finished with namaste. I remember the first time I saw that interpretation of the God in me greets the God in you. And
Yes.
it was so powerful because I thought, how can you ever be in judgment if that is what's always in your heart? So thank you so much for such a beautiful offering. If people want to reach out to you, might we put your contact information in the comments section or provide an email? I'm going to also try to add your contact information to a page that I'm putting together for all of our speakers. So we'll definitely make that available because you are just a wealth of information. You have so many gifts, and I'm so in gratitude for you sharing this with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and I'll be happy for you to share my contact information, email, and text messaging.
Perfect.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Miss Sally.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Misty.
you.
You're in my
Bye.
heart.
Thank you.